So in my latest Abyss Floor 12 Thoughts video, I showcased 3 different teams with 9-star clears. Of the 3 teams, my Chongyun team seemed to garner the most interest, and since Chongyun showcases received the second highest votes in the poll I posted a couple of weeks ago, let's take a look at it. What's up folks, Crush SG here, and today I'll be doing a showcase of my Chongyun quickswap melt comp. Here's the team: Chongyun, Xiangling, Bennett and Diona. And to be perfectly honest, calling it a Chongyun team isn't exactly accurate because you are technically spending just as much, if not more time on Bennett than on Chongyun. And there isn't a clear DPS carry on the team. Everyone basically contributes to the total damage output. So perhaps a Bennett-Chongyun cross-melt team is a more appropriate name. Anyway, I'll go over the team logic before getting into their gear and stats. The general idea behind the team is to trade melts between Chongyun, Xiangling, and Bennett. Xiangling is there to provide a consistent damage base with Pyro Aura, while Chongyun and Bennett are there to provide the large chunks of melt damage. The reason I run with Diona is mainly because of her shield and her C6, which grants 200 EM if you're standing within the area of her burst. Having a shield is recommended because Chongyun's E-skill has a very long animation and is prone to being interrupted. Diona's burst also functions as a cryo aura for Xiangling and Bennett to trigger melts off of. Yes, she could technically steal melt triggers from Chongyun occasionally, but a vast majority of the time you are either triggering melt with Chongyun, Xiangling or Bennett, so you can't really lose in this equation. Going over the pros and cons of the team, what I like about this team is that the melt trigger doesn't really matter here, making the team very easy to play because all you need to do is use everyone's E and burst skills as they come off cooldown. Of course, having Chongyun or Bennett's Q specifically trigger the melts does give the biggest bursts of damage, but on a whole, as long as you are triggering melts consistently, you'll be laying down the damage regardless. As for the cons, there are only 2 main ones I can think of. First is you need to stack enough ER on Xiangling, Bennett and Diona to get their bursts up on cooldown, and this may not be the easiest thing to do depending on what gear you have available to you. Second, as mentioned earlier, you do need a C6 Diona to run the comp exactly as I do. We've had a couple of opportunities to pull for Diona already, but I still get the impression that not many folks have her at C6. So if you don't have a C6 Diona, the other options that could also work well are Zhongli, Albedo or Ganyu, with Zhongli being the best alternative in my opinion. They are all 5-star units, but all of them work fine in this team at C0. You can technically still run Diona with just C1, but you are losing out on the 200 EM, which accounts for a fair bit of total damage output, and that makes running the 5-star options just better right out of the gate. Now it's a toss-up between Zhongli and Diona specifically here because both of them bring a damage boost and a shield. I've run with both of them and the damage output is more or less similar between the two, with Zhongli bringing a bigger shield with a 100% uptime, burst DPS and hard CC. On the flip side, having Diona on the team affords slightly more control over the melt triggering process, allowing me to set things up so that Bennett always triggers melt from his Q and Chongyun subsequently triggers melt with his E or Q more reliably. With Zhongli, you are kinda just leaving everything to RNG, and if his pillar ticks happen to remove the Pyro Aura at the wrong time, you could lose out on a lot of damage. Diona also helps with getting Chongyun's burst up more reliably every rotation. Going over the rotation itself, as mentioned earlier, the basic rotation is to use everyone's skills on cooldown, but if you want to be a little more optimal with things, you can try to get into a rhythm of always using Diona's skills first, followed immediately by Bennett's burst, and either straight into Chongyun's skills or going into Xiangling, then onto Chongyun. Either way, the goal is to secure as many large melt procs as possible, and I have found that this rotation produces the most frequent and reliable melt procs where it counts. You also want to be using Bennett's E-skill as often as possible to get as much energy regen as possible. This is crucially important because doing so allows you to get away with significantly less energy recharge on Bennett and Xiangling than otherwise possible. Going over the team's gear and stats, this is my Chongyun. He is C6, but really he works just fine at C0. The only constellations that remotely matter in my opinion are C2 for his cooldown reduction and C6 for additional damage on his burst. His talents are level 8, 11 and 11 respectively, and I have him in 2-piece Wanderers and 2-piece Noblesse because it just happens to be what I have available to me at the moment. Other artifact choices could be 2-piece Blizzard with 2-piece Noblesse, 2-piece Blizzard with 2-piece Gladiator, or even 2-piece Blizzard with 2-piece Wanderers. Given the choice, I'd personally go with either Wanderers and Blizzard or Blizzard with Noblesse. I haven't mathed out the best ratios between the three stats because I don't have the gear to optimize fully, so I'm just trying to keep a good balance between attack, crit and EM. For the weapon, I went with the Blackcliff Slasher, minus R5, but honestly it might as well be R1 because refine ranks on the Blackcliff really only matter in the open world and in domains. You won't really be stacking it much or at all on bosses and on the current floor 12. That said, because of the stat rolls I have on my gear at the moment, the Blackcliff happens to be one of the best 4-star choices for me, with the R1 Wolf's Gravestone edging it out a little in damage consistency. The upcoming Lithic Claymore also presents an interesting option, especially if you can get some refine ranks on it and run with a third Liyue character like Ganyu or Zhongli instead of Diona. Onto my Xiangling, and she is also C6, but C4 is the kicker here for her Pyronado duration. Her artifacts are also a result of just giving her whatever I had lying around. You could go with 4-piece Witches, Witches and Wanderers, Witches and Noblesse, Noblesse and Wanderers. The general goal here is to get enough energy recharge on her to get her burst up on cooldown and then use anything that scales her burst damage or melt damage. I'd recommend at least 170 total ER on her if you run with Bennett, and at least 220% if you don't run with Bennett or a second Pyro. I have the Favonius Lance on her for regen, but the prototype Star Glitter works well too. If you don't need the regen from weapons, you could go with the Blackcliff Pole or the upcoming Lithic Spear. Those will do nicely as well. I'm currently on the fence about the Dragon's Bane at the moment because I'm not sure how reliable that bonus damage will be considering it requires the target to be inflicted with Pyro and you are trading melt procs all the time in this comp, so that might diminish the reliability of the damage bonus somewhat. Over to Bennett, and I have him at C5, but really C1 is all you need in my opinion. Interestingly enough, having Bennett at C6 might actually work very well in this specific team because it'll help Chongyun trigger melts with his EN burst more reliably. But I'm not about to unlock Bennett C6 for just one team. MiHoYo seriously needs to give us the option to disable constellations at will. Anyway, my Bennett is currently rocking full Noblesse for the attack bonus on burst use, and similar to Xiangling, the goal is to get him with enough ER to get his burst up on cooldown. I have 207% ER on him right now, but realistically you probably only need about 170% to achieve full uptime. As you can see from the gameplay footage, I have his burst up very often well before the cooldown is up. I also have him built for DPS with good attack and crit stats because between him and Diona, I don't exactly need big heals from Bennett's burst. For weapons, we have a few choices. The F2P option would be the Festering Desire, and honestly, you don't really need more than that, but if you want to push things a little further, you could go with the Skyward Blade for a bigger attack buff and more energy recharge, or the Primordial Jade Cutter for a ridiculous amount of crit rate. But you will have to run an ER timepiece for respectable burst uptime. Finally, we have Diona, and I have built her with full HP gear for shield and heal strength. I have 4-piece Noblesse on her, but I don't actually need it on her because Bennett already has 4-piece Noblesse. This is just the gear I've always had on Diona. Again, you want to have enough ER on Diona to get her burst up on cooldown, and most of this is achieved by the Favonius Warbow, though you will probably still need about 170% ER on her to guarantee full burst uptime. These are her talent levels, and I'd say the most important one to level is her E skill for the shield strength. Alright, let's wrap things up. Overall, I like this team a lot. It is easy to play and does extremely well for arguably less investment than some of my Noelle teams. Chongyun is an absolute damage monster and I thoroughly enjoy using him. The only downside to Chongyun, as mentioned earlier, is he can be pretty clunky to use due to the targeting mechanic of his E skill and its propensity to be interrupted. Not gonna lie, this has led to some keyboard crushing moments along the way. But with the right team and some practice, you are rewarded heavily with some crazy clear speeds in the Abyss and easy boss kills. And that's all for today, folks. The new weapon banner is round the corner and it looks to be a really interesting one. I know I've been busy pre-farming materials for the Staff of Homer and the Lithic weapons and fully intend to pull for them. What do you guys think about the banner? Let me know in the comments below. With that, I'm gonna leave you with some additional gameplay footage, and as always, thumbs up if you liked the video, crush that subscribe button, and I'll catch you in the next one.